It's another episode with Freiburger, driving around and showing you stuff from my 80s Los Angeles. If you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I did an episode like this that was all about like the speed shops and the drag strips and the automotive related stuff. Well, this time it's gonna be much more personal about stuff that happened in my life, but it is car related. And at the end, we're gonna get into the Hollywood hair metal. Let's go! I figured a good place to start this whole thing is where it all began for me, which is this garage. Yep, this is the house in the Silver Lake area of Los Angeles where I grew up. I was here from when I was born till I was about 20 years old, and I remember working on cars for the very first time right here. I must have been 5, 6, 7, something like that, and I was lying underneath my father's 46 Ford helping him change the rod bearings right there on that side of the garage. And there was a whole lot of other cars and motorcycles here over the years. Once I threw my dad out of the garage, I created some iconic muscle car scenes without even knowing it. Check this out. That is my 71 six-pack 4-speed air grabber Roadrunner, my 70 Super Bee, and my 78 Honda XL100. And remember, I was just 19 years old. I can never recall if this was my second car or third. I don't know, I might have bought the Roadrunner first, but this is a 69 Dodge Dart convertible. And here's the garage the day I sold my 71 Roadrunner. When I sold the Roadrunner, I got a Land Cruiser, then sold that and used the money to get this 77 Bronco. And yeah, that's the original paint color. I'm standing here about ready to slash the sheet metal for tire clearance. Finally, here are 2 Super Bees from the movie shoot that we did that was Henry Winkler directed. My dad was the car coordinator. Look for the full story about that on my channel. It's called My Car Was Used in a 1980s TV Movie and the Fonz F-Bombed Me. Yeah, that's the title of the video. Go check that out. It's worth it. So, an incredible amount of really good memories here, and some bad ones. For example, I can't believe we even did this. There's a manhole cover right here, and we used to just put a funnel in the hole and drain all of our used oil right down the manhole cover. And one time I remember we were doing something, me and some friends, and we lifted the manhole cover and couldn't get it back in there, and it fell down sort of sideways in the hole, and we couldn't get it out, and a car was coming, and we ran out of the way. And this poor guy just cleaned the oil pan right off the underside of his car on that thing. The stupidity of youth. Anyway, let's cruise. We're gonna see more cool stuff. I should mention that that house looked nothing like that when I grew up. In fact, they added a story to it, radically remodeled it. My parents bought it in 1967 for dirt cheap. It was all run down and thrashed. The neighborhood hadn't become super hip at the time, but it does have a good story that I'll tell you in a minute. But right now, this house right here on the right-hand side belonged to Bob Gurr, who is like the original Disney Imagineer. Every single vehicle you can name when Disney opened was designed by Bob Gurr, and he's still around. He's like 94 or 95. I've taken tours with him. He's super sharp, super cool. You could see him at Bob Gurr Official on Instagram. It's G-U-R-R. He designed the original Autopia cars even. And like the Doom buggies that are inside the Haunted Mansion, all that stuff. Now, the story that connects with my house goes together with this estate that's up here on the right-hand side. In the early 20s, it was built by Antonio Moreno. It was called the Canfield Moreno Estate because he was married to Daisy Canfield, who was an oil heiress. Her dad was responsible for a ton of the oil wells that were all around the city way back in the 20s and 30s. And that big estate right there was Antonio Moreno's. He was a silent movie star. And that place, when I was growing up, was a Franciscan nunnery and girls' school, and occasionally they would let us come in, all the neighborhood kids, and go in the pool there. The connection to my house is this. Antonio Moreno's place was the only thing on the hill in the very early 20s. But by 1924-ish, he decided to sell plots for other homes. And by 1927, they had built this model home to show potential buyers what it was going to be all about. And that house is the one that I grew up in. It's cool to find this old ad. It's kind of wild how this whole area at first was for the super elite rich people, and then they sold it off to the wealthy middle class, and then it became sort of regular middle class when I was there, and now it's full-on hipster and super expensive. Right now I am on this giant street leading down the back side of my house, and the reason I am showing you this is I remember my brother driving my dad's 72 Chevelle station wagon at an unreasonably high rate of speed down here. They now have a stop sign, but there's a section that comes down, levels out, and then goes down again, and we would jump cars off of this. Hardcore. Once I was doing that with a friend. I can't remember what car we were in. I think it was a 67 Mustang. And we hit this flat spot and sailed off this part right here, and he lost it, and we absolutely 180'd in the middle of the street. Crazy times. Right now I'm at the intersection of Griffith Park Boulevard and Hyperion, and there used to be 4 gas stations right here. As a matter of fact, this spot was Lars Carlson's Chevron, an old school service station. I remember riding back and forth across the hoses to make the bell ding. I remember my father getting a valve job on his 72 Chevelle right here. But the coolest thing is I have a photo of this spot from back in the 80s. There's a lot to see in this photo from 1986. First, my friend Greg's AAR CUDA, and that's him standing next to my Super Bee in the back. And he's also editing this video. That's my dad on the left in his jacket from Tom Anthony's Precision Driving Team. Across the street is some guy in a 1970 Olds Rally 350. We didn't even know it. He just happened to be there. They made about 3,500 of those. Also note that gas was $1.33, higher than the average because California. Pretty cool, right? Also, that building directly across the street was the Griffith Park Cleaners, where my dad got his 67 Fairlane wagon that unfortunately me and my friends cut the top off of. All right, more cruising. Here at the same intersection on the right-hand side where this Gelson supermarket is was the original Disney Studios in LA from 1926 to 1940. And that's where the famous Snow White movie was made in 1937. Of course, they also did all the Mickey Mouse stuff. And there's a couple of little houses up here with thatched roofs, and local lore really conflicts as to whether those were influenced by Snow White. I don't think so, because they were made in 1931, or if Disney was influenced by those to put them in the Snow White movie as the Seven Dwarfs houses. It's hard to say. And now we're rolling up to my high school, John Marshall High School. And I'll tell you a couple good stories about this place. Right now we're on the back side of my high school, John Marshall in Silver Lake, and that's the football field, and that's where the very closing scene of Grease was shot. Like We Go Together Like Ramalama-Lama, Da-Digga-Da-Ding-A-Dong, all of that stuff, shot right there, in addition to a bunch of other things that I'll tell you about. Now right here is the crosswalk where I got hit by a car when I was 17 years old. Me and one other guy stepped off this curb, and there was a lady in a VW Rabbit who had a patch over one eye, and apparently she was turned talking to the passenger, and at about 40 miles an hour she creamed me and one other guy. He was taking a step and the car hit his leg and broke his leg. I shattered this arm. The bone split vertically right there. Not a break this way, a break that way. And so I've got a big plate in my arm. I was in the hospital for, I don't know, 5 or 6 days or something like that. And I was just finishing the rebuild of the 383 in my 1970 Super Bee at the high school auto shop. And so my friends had to get together and finish that up for me while I was in the hospital. All right, let's look at the front side. As I'm driving away from that crosswalk, I'll give you kind of some grim local history, which is that maybe a quarter mile up this street is the La Bianca house, where the Manson family killed Leno and Rosemary La Bianca in 1969. I told you that the movie Grease was shot on the football field. Well, I was actually in a production of Grease when I was in high school. Yes, I was in drama. I was the only kid they said that they had ever seen in drama, AP English, and auto shop all at the same time, which obviously turned into my career. And there's a super embarrassing photo of me standing in front of these doors, dressed 50s style in my leather jacket as Kanicki in Grease. All right. Let's look over at the main part of the building because it's way more interesting than my personal story. This is the front of John Marshall High School, built in 1931, and it's really a local landmark. In 1971, the earthquake made it unstable and they shut it down for a lot of years and finally braced it up, rebuilt the entire inside of it, and I was able to attend here in this building, which was super cool. You recognize it from all kinds of TV shows and movies. In, I think, 63 to 65, there was a TV show called Mr. Novak. He was a teacher, and that whole thing was set here. More recently, let's see, people my age probably know things like Pretty in Pink or Zapped. Zapped was shot completely here, inside and everything. And there is a photo of my car and some friends' cars parked right out front here with the little kit car that was used in Hardcastle and McCormick. Now, probably the big deal is that Van Halen's Hot for Teacher video was shot right here. There was the scene when they were in that Phaeton right out front here where he does a burnout and takes off. That's right at that spot. Me and my friends were actually here when they were shooting that video, and the story about that's just a little bit X-rated, so I'll probably leave it out, and now everybody will ask about it in the comments. It involved David Lee Roth and the model who was the teacher in that video. And the other thing that's kind of wild is that there are photos of Elizabeth Short here. She was the Black Dahlia, obviously the infamous and unsolved murder in 1947 in Los Angeles. There's pictures of her standing in front of those doors right here, and also sitting on the steps on that little wall right there. There's so much more, but that's all I got for now. I'm not gonna bore you to death with all the intricacies of my high school life. Instead, I'm gonna go find other cool stuff. Now I'm approaching the house where my friend Greg lived in the 80s. And there's a bunch of cool then and now photos that I can show you from here. I love then and now stuff. That was pretty cool. And now Greg is one of my editors. Now I'm in Griffith Park, donated to the city of Los Angeles by a guy named Griffith J. Griffith and his family in the late 1800s. And this is the Greek Theater from 1931. In World War II, it actually served as barracks, but it's been a concert venue. And my high school was so big that I graduated from high school here. I've got this picture of me out front on graduation day with a very close friend from high school, and immediately thereafter, her name was Robin Ortiz, and she was killed in 1989 when a building fell on her in the Loma Prieta earthquake up near Santa Cruz. And I also, on a higher note, saw a couple bands here. I saw Striper and Loudness at the Greek. And of course, right up the road here is the very famous Griffith Park Observatory. And you've seen that in a cajillion movies, including famously Rebel Without a Cause. All right, let's go see some other stuff in Griffith Park. Leaving this steep hill by the Greek Theater reminds me that one time I was riding my 10-speed down, and with the hills, you could get going fast. I hit a pothole, flew over the handlebars, and I still have the scar right there on my chin, and I broke a bunch of teeth. I still have a bunch of molars that don't have the pointy part on them. Still in Griffith Park, this is the Autry Museum of Western Heritage. But back in the day, this is something that we called a donut shop, meaning it was just a big expanse of dirt. And I have a photo that's actually pretty poor, but it gives you the idea of me doing donuts in the lot with my Super Bee. I think Greg actually shot that photo. The other interesting thing here, and just to give you sort of an idea where I am, the LA Zoo is right across the street, and the freeway and the LA River is right over here. This spot was the Griffith Park Aviation Park, or the Griffith Park Aerodrome, or the National Guard Airport. Yeah, there was an airstrip right here. And then immediately after World War II, they had what was called Roger Young Village. And this whole area was covered with Quonset huts, and it was housing for service people that were coming back from World War II. And that ended up going away 1953 or 1954, and eventually they built the LA Zoo right across the street that has a massive parking lot where I learned to drive a stick and where we would come at night and do donuts almost endlessly. And back then it was just empty and kinda no one cared. So that's the story about this area. What's next? Ooh, I know what's next. Let's go. Here's a mildly entertaining story. I was at this park over here once when my kid was really little, and I spotted a lady who worked with me at the publishing company. And I walked over to her, and she was acting like, I don't know, kind of aloof, sort of distant, which I thought was weird. And then her family walked over, her daughter and another guy, and she introduced me to her daughter, and she introduced me to the guy. She's like, and this is Dave. I was like, oh, okay, hey man, how's it going? It was Dave Grohl. Yeah, her daughter was actually married to Dave Grohl. And I didn't know the guy from nothing. And so that is the story of me meeting Dave Grohl. This is the Mineral Wells camping area in Griffith Park, and it's changed a lot. I came here basically because I wanted to show you this awesome photo of me and my friends jumping a '68 Dodge Dart 340 car. Yeah, we were irresponsible. And you know what, right here, this was a dump up till 1985, and then they started filling it in. We called this road up here the dump road. We would come here and thrash all the time. As a matter of fact, there's a entrance to horse trails over here. We would come into Griffith Park like at midnight and drive our cars on the horse trails. You know, I'm realizing the more this video goes on, the more I seem like a complete delinquent. And you know what, I was. But I think it's going to get worse. Let's go look at some more stuff. Now I'm in Glendale, and this is sort of the industrial area, and it was really abandoned on weekends when I was a teenager. And we would come over here and just relentlessly do burnouts. There was a Levitt's furniture store over there that's now some sort of studio place that had a huge parking lot for donuts. But also we came right here in this alley one time to do burnouts, some with my Super Bee and some more with that same 340 Dart that we were jumping in Griffith Park. And you can still see that there's an old Shell sign down there that's sort of the marker that you can see in that 80s photo. So once again, another cool then and now shot. Now I'm at Forest Lawn, which is a cemetery in Glendale, California. Seems like a strange place to be. And fortunately in my youth, I did not do anything disrespectful here, but we did come and cruise around in our muscle cars and take some pictures up at the top. And I wanted to do another then and now kind of shot. This place is interesting though. It was founded in 1906. And at a time, it was the biggest tourist attraction in California, like bigger than Disneyland before there was Disneyland. And that's because this is the first cemetery that really had the concept of making it a place to visit. They had attractions like fountains and cool buildings and statues and stuff like that that people wanted to come see. It was like an event. And there is a glut of famous people who are interred here. Tons. Probably the peak would be Michael Jackson. Walt Disney is here. Hundreds more. And throwing it back to the beginning of the episode, silent film star Antonio Moreno, who lived up the street from my house and died the year I was born. And that's it. Why we brought our cars up here, I'm not really sure, but it was a nice place to get some photos. Now we're in the Eagle Rock part of town. This is 3327 Verdugo Road and the site of my first job in the performance aftermarket. This is where Jacobs Electronics was, which was a performance ignition company. And I really learned a lot here. I was in sales and marketing and just sort of did everything. Here are some photos of a few things that went down around here. first, here's Dr. Chris Jacobs himself. He's the founder of the company, and he was actually really good to me. This photo is right where I'm parked today, and back in that old pic, you can see my Super Bee over there on the left. The building itself is not all that different than it was, except for maybe the paint. There was a loading bay on the left-hand side where we worked on cars like this Chrysler Power Magazine Dodge Dart and this Circle Track car that was, I think, from the magazine also. I was sort of in marketing, and you can't believe that I made this fish tank with live fish and an underwater ignition system that was a functioning and sparking a plug. It was for a trade show. Can you believe the hazard of this thing? I don't think we'd do that now. Eventually, the company moved from Los Angeles to Midland, Texas, and my friend Tony and I were instructed to load this truck with everything that was inside the building and leave a note on this front door telling everyone that was left behind in LA that they were fired and the whole operation was moving to Texas. Tony and I made a lot of trips back and forth to Texas that summer, stopping at places like this old gas station and junkyard in New Mexico. And this is really what helped me develop my passion for road trips and old stuff. In Midland, Jacobs rented us this little house. 1987 is seen at the bottom with my Pontiac wagon in the carport there, and the top pic is pretty much current. I posted this on Facebook a couple of years back, and a guy commented that his mom had grown up in the house, I think after we were there. How weird is that? The internet just makes the world small. We mostly just hung out and got bored, but at least the place was well kept. At one point, we went to a local drag strip. I'm not sure where this is. Is it the one that's in Penwell, Texas? Someone here should be able to let me know. And here are some of the cars that were here that day. Who knows? Perhaps one of you were there. And now, let's get back to LA. And the other cool thing is that there used to be a grocery store right across the street where a scene from Adam 12 was shot. I love Adam 12. Now I'm on San Fernando Road, 2733 to be specific, and this was the ancient site of Wyand, the performance company that was founded by Phil Wyand. And I applied at Wyand while I was working for Jacobs Electronics. Dr. Jacobs knew I was doing it. I was dealing with Joan Wyand, and I almost got a marketing manager job there, but did not. And there was another facility that was further up San Fernando on the opposite side that I can't remember, but I think it was an actual aluminum foundry. If not, they were making all of their intake manifolds there. It was still part of that really old school era of speed equipment. Speaking of which, Phil Wyand was a guy who I think in the late 30s, maybe early 40s, was in an accident in his Roadster and he was confined to a wheelchair, but that did not stop him from becoming a king of the performance aftermarket. And at this site right here, his mom bought a house in 1941. And he started making his parts in the garage here and eventually started building buildings to have his speed empire. And he owned both this one and 2377 next door, as well in the later years as that place that is further up the street. Now, here's the thing I'm going to be able to do, and this is sort of a warm-up for that. I can drive around LA and show you all kinds of locations of old speed companies and the old advertisements for them and the parts that they made and the people behind it. So if you want to see that kind of in-depth history from me next on one of my LA tours, please put it in the comments, let me know. And now, We're gonna switch off to hair metal Freiburger, and we're going to Hollywood. And now I'm rolling down the Cahuenga Pass into Hollywood. A lot of people have asked me sort of my recollections of Hollywood from back in the sort of hair metal days. So that's what you're gonna get here. You're gonna look at some of the clubs, and there'll be a little bit of automotive stuff as well. I am shooting this on Thanksgiving Day, hoping that the traffic was going to be zilch, but no. Right now I'm in traffic right in front of the Hollywood Bowl, obviously the famous venue that opened in 1922, more than 100 years ago at this point. And it actually has a little bit of automotive history to it, because back in the day when Peterson Publishing was in Hollywood, they shot a lot of car features in the parking lot here. And as a matter of fact, I remember in 1972, 3, 4, some time frame like that, my father showed his Bentley in a car show there, the Le Concours d'Elegance, and he loves to tell the story about how his car won Best Unrestored Original over Lucille Ball's Rolls Royce, and her husband, who was not Desi Arnaz, he was the next guy who she was married to longer, whose name has been forgotten by me. Anyway, he was really torqued that my father won that award over their car. Hollywood Bowl, let's see, I saw Tom Petty there. I saw Aerosmith with Motley Crue opening. I saw Motley Crue on their supposed farewell tour that really wasn't a farewell tour. And I've seen some other concerts and stuff there as well. The other car-related thing at the Hollywood Bowl was that the LA Roadsters had their show there for several years during the mid-60s. A lot of very famous and important hot rods on display there in the tiered parking levels right in front of the bowl. I'm coming down Highland right now, and I'm going to turn right on Hollywood Boulevard. This is the way I used to take to work when I was working at the magazines at Peterson Publishing way back in the early 90s. Here we go. This is, of course, the main stretch of Hollywood Boulevard, the El Capitan Theater. And coming up here on my right is going to be the Chinese, which was Mann's Chinese back when I was a kid. I remember seeing Star Wars there twice, as well as Empire Strikes Back. Long legacy of that Chinese theater. But the automotive interesting thing is right here on the corner of Orange and Hollywood Boulevard. Now it's called La La Land. That was Peterson's Motorama. Robert E. Peterson, the founder of Hot Rod Magazine and Motor Trend Magazine, had a car museum there with like cars of the stars and everything. And the great story is in 1975 when they had their opening gala party, they had Tony Nancy in his Top Fuel dragster do a burnout on Hollywood Boulevard, and it broke windows in the bank building across the street. Super cool. When I was sort of coming of age out here, Hollywood was still really seedy, and my parents were kind of horrified that I would come down here and hang out, but me and my friends would cruise in our muscle cars. We would hop in my Super B, Greg's AAR Cuda, Tony's Duster, sometimes all three of them. It would be like that scene in the movie Swingers, where everybody has to take their own car to the party. We would do that all the time. Everyone wanted to drive their own car, so even though we all could have gotten one, we would lead follow. And sometimes it was cool to see all those muscle cars just on Hollywood Boulevard. And right now I have cut down onto Sunset and we're heading towards the Strip. Right here is the famous Guitar Center, and right next to this at one time was the little hamburger stand that was the Sunset Grill from the Don Henley song. Now I'm at the corner of Genesee and Sunset Boulevard, and this is the Screen Actors Guild building that opened in 1956. And so, therefore, Ronald Reagan had an office there. Reagan was the president of the Screen Actors Guild from 47 to 52, and again from 59 to 60, which is what he would have been there. But that building, after the Screen Actors Guild left it, was owned by Robert E. Peterson, once again, founder of Hot Rod. And at the time that I started at the company in 1991, That building held magazines like Carcraft and Chevy High Performance and some of the Mustang magazines. And my friend and publisher Jerry Pitt had Ronald Reagan's office that we always like to joke about. We're at Crescent Heights and Sunset now, and off here to my left, where there's now a mall, is the site of the famous Schwab's Drugstore, which was a famous soda fountain and cafe way back in the day, where actors are said to have been discovered. On the right here is the Comedy Store, which back in the 40s was Ciro's, a really famous nightclub. And now here we are at the corner of La Cienega and Sunset. This building here is on the site of the very first Hot Rod Magazine office where I worked. This is 8490 Sunset. I remember that because it was where I came to work every day at Hot Rod Magazine starting in 1991. So many good stories there. They did tear down the original Peterson building and put up whatever that monstrosity is. That building there that now just says Supreme used to be the glorious Tower Records, the center of music. That's where you would go to get all your music when it came out. It was such a big deal. Really a shame that that's gone and that all our music is digital now, because it was really an experience going in there. And then next, up on this corner, is the Whiskey A Go-Go. I see the marquee right now says Hollywood Roses is going to be there. You know, Guns N' Roses started with two bands. There was Hollywood Rose and LA Guns. And members of those two bands became Guns N' Roses. Oh, and there's an ad on there for LA Guns at the Rainbow Bar and Grill, which is right there next to the Roxy Theater. Wow, good times at those places way back in the day. I have a neat old black and white photo that I shot and developed in college that shows a bunch of long hairs standing in front of the Rainbow Bar and Grill. Every time you went in there, you would see Lemmy from Motorhead. He was there every time. I remember running into Yngwie Malmsteen there one time. Good party spot. And the Roxy right next door. I don't know if I can even remember all the bands I saw there. Most of the ones I saw at the Roxy never became famous. They were just local stuff. But I do remember seeing Warrant there. Right here, just past the Roxy and the Rainbow, was Gazzari's. Long gone at this point. It's now the Key Club, I think. Gazzari's was where all the up-and-coming bands would play. The Doors and Van Halen were house bands at Gazzari's. I think I saw Warrant there too. Gazzari was the godfather of rock and roll. It's pretty good. This Gil Turner's Liquor here on the right was also a standard stop. Okay, right over here with the security guys slash bouncer slash concierge guys staring at me wondering what I'm doing is the Sunset Marquee. So that little hotel, which is actually pretty big and fancy on that little street, is where the rock stars actually stay when they come to Hollywood. I know that the Chateau Marmont on Sunset is the one that is known for that, but Sunset Marquee is the underground rock star place. And here's a good story about that. In 2004, when I was redesigning Hot Rod Magazine, my boss at the time was a guy big character with high-end taste, and he would stay there at the Sunset Marquee. And I would go over there and have meetings, and we'd eat, or we'd go to the bar or whatever. And one night we're over there, and Billy Gibbons is at the bar. Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, and I am vaguely acquainted with this guy because, of course, he built a bunch of hot rods, and we covered them in Hot Rod Magazine, and so he knew who I was, I knew who he was, and I was like, hey, Billy, what's happening? He sits down at the table, we start to have a beer, and my boss is blown away that I've actually got the swagger to, like, have Billy Gibbons sit down with us. And so we're sitting there chatting, and a guy walks up behind Billy, goes, you know, hey, Bill. Bill looks up and goes, hey, Bob. And I look over, and Bob is Robert Plant. It's actually Robert Plant. And later on in the evening, I get up and go to the restroom, and who is in the restroom but Jimmy Page? And my boss is absolutely blown away at this because he really likes sort of the celebrity connection and stuff. And he knows a guy who knows a guy at the New York Post. And what is the name of the gossip column that's in New York Post? Is it page 5 or page 6? Something like that. They actually did a little squib, a paragraph in the newspaper that described how Hot Rod Magazine editor, you know, rubbing elbows with Billy Gibbons having a Corona while Plant and Page looked on, or whatever it said. But that was a memorable, fun moment. Actual rock star life in Hollywood. This here is the Palladium on Sunset, a massive gala place, opened in 1940. I think I was first aware of it when I was addicted to Adam 12 as a kid, and the very last scene of the very last episode of Adam 12 was shot right there where Reed received some sort of policeman's award. Back in the 80s, I saw TSOL here, I saw the Ramones, 100% the reason for my severe tinnitus. It's where that all started. I also saw Dokken and Odin, and I forget some other bands as well. So that is the Palladium. Let's get back to the convertible. By the way, the Palladium was designed by the same guy who did the Greystone Mansion in Beverly Hills, and that was used in the early episodes of Knight Rider, so there's a car tie-in. Speaking of architects, here is the Capitol Records building. It is so famous. Now, a lot of people say that it's designed to mimic a stack of records with a needle on top. The architect actually says that was not true. He just wanted to build a round building. In December of 1963, Hot Rod Magazine's Tom Medley shot this photo of the Beach Boys with Sam Conrad's Olds-powered Model A Roadster on Deuce rails. They were in the middle of a thrash of a California concert tour, and this is just after Little Deuce Coupe came out. This place was called the Palace in my day, but it opened in 1927. It had a number of different names, including El Capitan and the Jerry Lewis Theater in the Hollywood Palace. It's now Avalon. And that's it for this time. Remember, if you want to see more Freiburger stories about LA, I could dig deep into the history of speed parts around here. I can go way more into it than I did when I was showing you Phil Wyant's place back there on San Fernando Road. So drop in the comments whether you want to see that or not. I'll probably do it someday either way, but it kind of depends on how soon I do it based on your input. And once again, do me a favor, if you dig the channel, share the channel, buy my merch, shop.davidfreiburger.com. And I will see you next time with more history, more adventures, road trips, horsepower, and car builds on the David Freiburger channel.